Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 68. Tonight, my guest is Andy West.
Sean.
Hey, Andy. Good evening.
I was just trying to text you to make sure we were still on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are good to go. So how's it going? What you been up to today?
Excellent. Well, I went snowboarding.
I was going to say, I was wondering if you got that squared away or if you already went.
Yeah, no, I went to Flagstaff, which is, only 2.5 hours from here. So.
Okay. Are you down in Phoenix or are you up north?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I lived in Phoenix for about 6 years back in the 90s.
Really?
I know it well. Yeah. You remember an old place called the Mason Jar on Indian School Road?
Yeah. That place, I think it's turned into something else, but the building is still there.
Yeah, that was like the mandatory rock haunt that everybody had to come play. And I used to work around the corner at a little hotel over there on Glen Rosa over there. So, yeah.
Really?
Right around the corner. I get all these frazzled 80s rock star guys walking in looking like a mile of bad road. Give me a room.
Totally. Wow, that's funny. Well, we moved here in '94, so we might have been here around the same time. But man, it's changed a lot since then.
So, what's the most recent musical project you've been part of?
Okay, so we did an album. I saw that you had interviewed Jeff Sipe. I did a little bit of checking on that one.
Yeah.
And Jeff is just, he's someone who I've always wanted to play with, just ever since I heard him with, Jonas and Sean Lane, right? I mean,
oh, sure. Yeah.
All that stuff was just ridiculous and ridiculously great. And he actually knew T. Lavitz, and he was from Atlanta, and Bruce Hampton and all that whole thing, and so Henry Kaiser, who's another good friend of mine, he saw Jeff.
I want to say that I thoroughly enjoyed the interview with you and Henry on Andre's show on Make Weird Music last week.
Oh, yeah.
Love Andre. He's an old friend of mine. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it's rare for people like me to mention their competition, but I'll gladly say, go check out Make Weird Music at YouTube. Subscribe to it. They talk about quality stuff, and their interviews are fantastic. So
it's true. That's great. Well, I went to your YouTube channel and I saw all the people that you've done, and I listened to quite a few, but not. I mean, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that's out there now, but your selection of people has been amazing. And I hope that you've created an archive of very interesting things, which I think, will live on. So that's cool. But the interview with Jeff is a great thing. And you asked me about the project. So I would just start back. It was about 2 years ago. We did this 2-3 years ago, maybe, with Jeff. Tracy Silverman, who's a fantastic violinist. I don't know have you ever heard of Tracy?
I don't think so. Okay,
well, he's another guy. I mean, he plays a 6-string violin. He's kind of a virtuoso. He's done concerts with Terry Riley, but he also does his own solo thing and orchestral things, and he's great. So somehow he got involved with this thing, and Henry and me and Jeff. And we did an album called 5 Times Surprise, which I'm very proud of. That's pretty out there. I mean, Anthony Pirog is the other guitar player, and he's another guy who's just great, totally unknown. I mean, not totally unknown, but relatively unknown. Most people, when I mention his name, don't know who he is. Anthony Pirog.
No, not offhand.
Yeah, well, if you go to Cuneiform Records, you'll hear 2 of his albums, and they're both.
Yeah, that's the label run by my old friend Steve Feigenbaum.
Oh yeah, Steve's awesome.
Yeah, he's a great
Henry
guy.
Introduced me to Steve many years ago when I was working in DC. Actually, I had a contract with AT&T, and Steve is in Baltimore or somewhere like that. We struck up a friendship, and that's when I went down the Cuneiform rabbit hole in like the early '90s.
Oh, yeah.
And there was everything. I mean, it was like, oh my goodness, all this stuff.
Oh yeah, it's such awesome music. It's a cut above. It isn't your typical rock and roll. It's sophisticated.
It's great.
Very forward looking.
Yeah. So everything that he's done is now on Bandcamp, so people can go. Again, it's a rabbit hole, but it's worth digging into.
Sure,
things that you just won't hear otherwise.
Yeah.
But
this album was called what?
It was called 5 Times Surprise.
5 Times Surprise. Now, is
Yeah.
that also the name of the band or the?
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Same.
right.
And what we did was we basically improvised out an album, with one exception. We did You Know by John McLaughlin by the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Oh
Did
yeah,
a version of that.
of course. Yeah. Is that da 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 da
That's
da
it.
do do
Yeah.
over
And
and over?
so when I'm playing that, the bass line is just sort of sitting there and there's a big space. And that's where Jeff does whatever the hell he wants. And
Right.
it's like, okay, I think I've got it. I'm like this with my foot, count. And it's like in 13 or some weird thing, I can't remember. But that was a blast. So that's out there. I also did a project with a good friend of mine, and it's called Zen Walk. And that kind of has more of its roots in the sort of the Tangerine Dream electronic kind of stuff that I did.
Oh, that's cool stuff.
Yeah. And this is on Bandcamp also, but you can see it through my website, through andywest.com. And we actually did, we started that before this whole Dregs thing came about, the whole Dregs reunion tour.
Mm-hmm.
But I went into this mode where I had to relearn all those songs and be able to play them. And, so we basically put that on hold until I got done with that.
Yeah, all that.
And
right.
then we put that out. And Henry and I are doing another album. He's actually mixing it now, which is, again, I really like doing this stuff. It's not typical of the kind of thing that, people who are fans of the Dregs would necessarily like, but, it's very interesting music. He has a friend named Chris Muir, who's one of his high school friends, really, and he's a great guitar player, very eclectic. When I met him several years ago, I was like, Henry, we should do something, and so Henry got Chris and this drummer named Lucas Ligeti, who's just Henry he's like a connector, he basically just knows a lot of different musicians and they're all fascinating. And so he pulled him in, and Stefan Thalen from Sonar came over. He was actually in Oakland for a couple of weeks, and Henry knew this, and he said, well, let's do an album while you're here. He's here for some music thing or something. And so that's going to come out shortly.
Excellent.
I've always got a million different little.
You think that'll be on Steve's label as well?
Don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out.
I don't know. I think maybe not. Henry said for some reason he was going to put it somewhere else. I'm not sure why.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Well, I want to talk about the Dregs, but before going back to the 70s and all that, I want to talk a bit about the reunion tour. That was such an unexpected treat, I've got to say. I mean, just a chance to hear that wonderful music in a live setting in a nice theater or Civic Center, Symphony Hall, or where did we see you guys? I think we saw you at Center Stage here in Atlanta. Actually,
oh, cool.
I think about it. Yeah, remember I was hanging out with Julie Cord. And
That's right.
Said hi after the show.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's funny. I did a search for you through my email, and one came up with from her from a couple of years ago.
We're probably all on it. Yeah.
Yeah, where she had mentioned you or something, but
oh yeah. Well, I met her, because I've known Mike for a long time, Mike Keneally. So,
yeah, right.
It's a small world after all. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have great taste. Really great taste in musicians. So I'm happy that you were.
Hey, while you're mentioning that, I wanted to mention, I was talking about Lyle Workman's brand new album. This is so amazing. Have you heard any of this yet?
It's crazy. I'm getting goosebumps. Well, first off, he's one of my favorite all-time musicians, and I did as a matter of fact, it was, I'm not on Facebook very much, but I do have a page there. And I went on to see if I could find your YouTube channel, and I saw you had posted a link to one of his videos, and I went and checked it out, and it's crazy, man. He is just unbelievable. And
he really is.
Yeah, and I went and I found out, okay, you can order it from their website. I mean, this was all happening before, just tonight. And I went and saw, and I heard an interview with him with, I haven't heard the one you did. I know you did one with him, right?
Yeah, back
Yeah.
last summer. Yeah.
Yeah. So not the, so not to, push the competition, but the Jude Gold with the no guitar is safe, right?
I like Jude Gold. He plays guitar with Starship.
Yeah.
Jefferson Starship. Yes.
He's a really, really good
Oh,
player
he's
too.
great. I remember reading him in my guitar magazines back in
Yeah.
the 80s. He's a great guy.
He's also a good interviewer, and he did an interview with Lyle, I think about a year ago, or maybe a little bit more. It was when I think he had just finished the album, but it wasn't like mastered, and he didn't know when it would come out and that kind of thing. And
Right.
they played some stuff from it, and I was like, oh my God, this is
Oh, yeah.
just.
And you saw the vid I posted today where they're like at Abbey Road
Yeah.
with the strings, and then he breaks out this electric 12 string and just plays the most Zappa-esque brilliant stuff on it. Well, it kind of made me think of Zappa. Some of these lines he plays are just out of this world.
I don't know what it is though. His his melodic sense is his melodic and heart. I mean, he's a Steve-like kind of guy, right? I mean, he plays very interesting harmonic movements, and his soloing is just so melodic, and it's not riffy, it's melodic.
Oh yeah, very much. And,
so it's pretty cool. That's a great one, and I'm
yeah.
really anxious to get that album because
Yeah.
I've got all three of the others that he's done.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. I think anybody that digs the Dregs has what it takes to appreciate this record too.
Absolutely.
So please check it out. It's Blue Canoe Records,
Right.
his record label, by the way. And it's only like $15.
It's crazy.
It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah,
It's
and actually all three
symphonic.
of his albums before that are great too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Harmonic Crusader, and I forget the name of the other one, but yeah.
Something Passages, and there's three of them, but they go. I think
Tabula Rosa.
Yeah, Tabula Rosa, right?
Yeah, Tabula. Okay.
And Something Passages, and so I think his first one was like in the mid '90s or something. So the span of his solo music, Harmonic Crusader, I listened to many, many times, and I would always be, when is he going to do another one?
Yeah. Are you the one that did the cover art for that? Was that you, or was it?
No.
Okay, because it's some well-known musician. I can't remember who it is. Maybe Prairie Prince, somebody like that did it, if I'm not mistaken, which I thought was interesting.
Prairie's a great artist.
Oh, then I bet it was him. Okay, because it's been a while since I, did that interview, but I remember him saying that some famous guy that we all know well did it. Yeah, I think it was Prairie Prince. Well, cool. So that reunion tour, how did that come about? And how long did it take to shake the rust off? I imagine some of those songs have been, implanted in your brain to the point, like Cruise Control, you could probably play in your sleep without not touching a bass for 20 years. But other things like, Day 444 and some of those other ones that you guys had never done before, that must have taken some time to get together.
Yeah. So it's one of those weird things where the timing was just right to try and do it, and there was a couple of emails back and forth, and Steve said, well, why don't we just get together and see how it sounds, and so we all went to Florida for 2 days, and before we went there, we learned a couple of tunes, easy Dregs tunes.
Yeah, what do you consider easy?
Well, like Refried Funky Chicken and Cruise Control and Free Fall, this kind of stuff. I mean, all these things are actually deceptively hard.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. For me, a lot of those things are kind of implanted in my DNA, from having done them for so long. But so what happened was when we agreed that we were going to try and do something, I told you about my friend Craig Pallett. When I called Craig, I said, I got to learn this stuff, man. And I started, there were so many gaps, and some of the songs, I knew the songs so well, but I didn't know what I had actually played on them.
Right.
And like Divided We Stand, I knew most of that, but there was like stuff, and the records were made, late 70s, early 80s. So the sonic quality is, the bass isn't really like in the forefront, and
Right.
even though, except when it is, I mean, there's, stuff there were melodic lines and things that were important, but, so this is a long way of me saying that it was a hell of a lot of work.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
I
But
mean,
gosh,
basically for me, it was just like, okay, get every song. We went through this giant, email conversation after email conversation, a couple of phone calls. What are we going to play? What are we going to play? This kind of stuff. We thought, well, let's just do the songs that, let's do Free Fall, because David Owski was on Free Fall,
mhm.
but he also played a lot of the songs that were on What If, and some of them on Dregs of the Earth. But then there was a lot of stuff that he hadn't played, and we said, okay, maybe you could just learn this stuff. And he's like, okay.
Right. Well, he did a great
Again,
job.
not knowing what was up. We started learning these things, and it was like, oh my God, this stuff is, first off, there's a lot of notes there to remember. And secondly, we played it at a time when it was like almost athletic,
Sure.
So a lot of work. And when we got together for the first time, we gave ourselves a week of rehearsals, and we were immediately kind of humbled and scared, like, oh yeah, we probably should have given ourselves at least 2 weeks, but we just plowed through it and kind of pulled it off. And it was really, because the crowd was so great, the audiences were so supportive, and, we all felt that people should hear this music,
Absolutely. And it was great to hear so many tunes that weren't really in rotation when the Dregs were out doing their thing in the past 20 years.
Right.
So many things from Free Fall in particular that really hadn't been played in a long time. It was
Right.
just an amazing set list. It was
It
just
was
about
really fun.
everything I would want to hear pretty much.
That's cool. Yeah. And day 444 was really challenging because, so there are no charts for any of this stuff.
Right. And I guess you can't just call the record label and say, send me the master tape for the bass on that album. It's
No,
none of that.
and keyboards in particular, so David Owski had to just kind of pick all this stuff off by ear. And I went to Augusta and North Carolina. Alan lives in Augusta. David Owski lives in North Carolina. And, the three of us sort of got together and tried to do some of these things. But there were some funny moments where, we're doing Twigs Approved, and Steve, stops and says, Owski, where's the piano line? and Owski goes, that's a piano?
Oops. Let's try it again tomorrow.
It's like this little section, which, okay, so I'll teach it to you now. And I'm sitting there listening to sing, and Twigs Approved is one of those songs that for me was pretty easy. I mean, it's not fast. It's a nice groove. There's some nice little bass parts in it. But there's this one section where, I'm just doing kind of like root movement or something, not very much, but it's like on the keyboard, it's like chord, 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 chord.
Right. Different one for every beat.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, this stuff, you forget about the genius of Morse and how he sort of did things. But so that was a challenge, but I mean, it was great. And the people that came and saw us, it was just wonderful to be able to do it.
Well, I had Steve on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
which
I heard a little bit of that too.
Fantastic. And, I said, will we ever get a live album to remember this by, or a DVD? And he's like, I'm not really crazy about live stuff. Things just go wrong, this, that, it's just like, oh, Steve, do it anyway. Come on. Bill Evans here is dying to mix it for you. Give him the tapes.
Right.
So
Right.
I hope maybe someday. And, he was talking about just the whole catalog being hard to get. And I was like, if you guys could get your hands on that stuff and mix it for surround, everybody that's a Dregs fan would buy it again, I think.
Yeah, right.
So maybe
Just
someday.
hand it to Steven Wilson and, put his stamp on it.
Exactly. I mean, I think some of those albums would be great in surround,
Oh, yeah.
They'd be fantastic. So Who knows? Maybe
Well,
someday.
we all really, I mean, that's the thing about that band is that we all really love the music. I mean, we love it, and we love it because of what it is. It's not even like when I mean, I almost never listened to the Dregs music. I had to relearn all that stuff. But coming back to it at that point, I just thought, wow, this is really, really unique and great. And the people that like it really like it, you know?
Well, there's nothing quite like it, That's yeah, I think that's why it's so special.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of wanted to pick your brain a bit about kind of how Steve's compositional style came together. Like, how do you remember?
Yeah. Well,
And what
okay.
are like some of the first songs he ever wrote that you guys played?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the Odyssey was one of the first things that
Oh,
we did.
yeah, one of my favorites. Yeah, it's such an
And
amazing tune.
there's a section in Assembly Line, which was on, I think, on our last album, or maybe it was the second to last album. I can't remember. Uh, which actually came from a song that we had called the Churl Sequence, which was just something that Steve did, and it was really cool. On the bass, it was like this kind of like quick moving fifths, like I would play, like A, E, B, kind of thing, and
Hmm.
just sort of like going up and down, and I mean, he wrote the line, I didn't write it, and so what I saw was kind of like a lot of evolution but the place he started from was really interesting. I mean, we were doing those kinds of things, and like refried funky chicken, I think he came up with in Miami when I was not around there, but he sent me like the music, the line. He said, "There's this one line that's kind of hard. I'll send you the line." It's like the little section that he and I are doing like a unison line real fast. And I remember getting it, and I remember sort of learning the line, trying to figure out the fingering, and I didn't notice the tempo.
All right.
So when we got together to try and play it, I was playing it about half speed, and he was like, "No, it's got to be like this, and I'm like, "Oh God, okay." And then he kind of would help me with picking, and my whole picking style was completely informed by his. I mean,
I
he
think it
would
would
be
have
like,
to be.
"Yeah,
You know,
like here's how you do it," and he would show me exercises and stuff. And so it was really all about that alternate picking style, right? There was not
sure.
a lot of the sweeping or any of that stuff, really. It was all alternate picking. So
Now he said the only sweeping he does is in his garage.
yeah. That's not exactly true though, but certainly from the old days that was true.
Sure.
But I've heard him do it.
Did he have to change his style a bit because of his hand issues and
Oh
such?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I remember him saying that it was, doing this music was some of the hardest stuff he's had to do in a long time. And boy, I really didn't notice though. It seemed like he flew right through it. But
Well,
yeah,
the like the bash, which
oh
is
yeah,
the country song. In the old days, I mean, if you listen to the live recordings of that, it's all up and down. I mean, it's just really fast, and of course now there's guys that are just,
oh
I mean,
sure,
I don't even know what they're doing. It's like it's just beyond. But
right.
they stood on the shoulders of the giants that came before them. Um, to pull this stuff out. But I did notice because I would stand next to him and I'd listen to what he's doing, and he devised some kind of way of like a combination of picking, but also finger picking that was really cool. And so instead of having to power through the bash with that crazy picking thing, he managed to have some finesse on it,
Huh?
which is kind of cool. But some of it just demanded that he play it a certain way, and I could tell that it was hurting. You know, he
Who
had
do you?
he had cream for his hands and stuff, and it was sad.
Well, he got through it, and I think he's getting better now too. I mean, I think I've seen some shots of him playing without the brace on. So,
Oh,
I think
cool.
that must be some sort of progress. But
Yeah.
yeah, just to have to kind of go teach yourself how to repick is a daunting task. I think a lot of people would have hit a wall and never really would have been able to do it. So kudos to Steve. He
Yeah.
continues to
Well, you know,
amaze.
he's definitely a powerhouse in that way.
Where do you think his who do you think inspired his compositional style? I mean, I kind of hear some John McLaughlin in there. It seems like there's a kind of a thread that leads from Mahavishnu to the Dregs, but I can't think of a whole lot of other people.
Okay, well, I think that Steve. Okay, so Mahavishnu, you can very clearly trace back through the jazz roots of McLaughlin.
Sure.
You know, so but he broke. He kind of like took where he was. If you listen to oh God, what's the name of that album?
Bitches Brew.
No, his one like his first solo album.
I forget. It's like a one-word title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that album, is very transitional, right?
Right. Pretty kind of raw.
Yeah, but then he went into the Mahavishnu world, and so Steve, I think, took a lot of classical, just like classical listening, and Bach, the kind of original classical stuff, right?
Sure.
I mean, he talks about how the switched on Bach and the well-tempered clavier, which are the two Wendy Walter Carlos things. He listened to a lot of that stuff. But when we met Alan and Rod and started that particular version of the band, in college, we were almost like a Mahavishnu cover band. I mean, we learned almost everything off of Meeting of the Spirits and Birds of Fire.
Sure.
And would play that stuff, along with Jessica by the Allman Brothers, along with Cruise Control and everything else, right? While Steve was building up his own repertoire. But we really cut our teeth on those two first Mahavishnu albums.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. And I think some of those songs popped up in the set even later. I think I saw them do a couple, getting Jerry Goodman in there. How can you resist playing a couple?
No, of course. Yeah.
So
pretty crazy. But I really love that we did that,
Absolutely. And I would say it really informed a lot of the Dregs music in the long run,
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, Steve told me, he heard the Mahavishnu Orchestra play at the University of Miami in the cafeteria. They had concerts, bands would come in, and he heard them play. And I remember him telling me about that. And the violin and electric guitar combination, when he heard that, was just like, oh, this is it. This is incredible.
Sure. It's a really short list of, rock bands or fusion bands with a violinist, I mean, Jerry Goodman, John Luke Ponty. I'd have to throw in the guys from Kansas, it's a whole different ballgame trying to play a violin with a roaring rock band behind you, if you can't hear yourself, then you're kind of hung out to dry. So, and you can imagine it.
Something else I saw you play, I just kind of interject, was the Thank You Scientist.
Oh yeah.
Thing. Yeah. And that bass player did his whole thing, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool that he did that. But they also have a violin, right?
I think they do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not as prominent. I mean, the singer takes prominence in that band, but their instrumental stuff is pretty cool.
Got a question in the chat room. Did the rest of the Dregs study counterpoint also?
Well, okay. So all of us had music school training. I didn't actually get a degree. Rod and Steve and Alan did. Alan, was a classical violinist. Steve got a theory and composition, or combined with a classical performance major, I think, at University of Miami. Rod was a jazz and composition major. So the short answer would be sure. And that's where I think, the classical stuff. I mean, David Ousky made this comment where we relearning the songs, and Steve was telling him how one of these things went, and Ousky made some kind of like funny comment, like, oh yeah, of course, because you don't know anything about voice leading.
Right. Oh yeah, I hear that. I get that from my keyboard player occasionally. It's like more poly chords, and it's just like, I like the sound. What can I say?
Yeah. Well, no, he was actually saying that the voice leading on what you're showing me is really incredible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
So,
and that really sets Steve apart from his peers. You know, everybody kind of can lump him in that kind of dexterous ballpark with Satriani and all those guys, but none of them come close to the compositional caliber that Steve Morse has. You know,
yeah. It's a different thing, you know. I
it's
mean,
a
he
different
really,
ball game totally.
yeah,
You know, it's more like a classical composer, you
yeah.
know, not just some
I mean,
rock guitar
I love
player.
learning that stuff because there were always he would, you know, he would compose for us like we were his orchestra, you know. I mean, it's like, okay,
Sure.
I've got these parts and these kinds of things, and you know, this is something that people don't understand. I mean, the way that you learn things now is completely different. You know, we didn't even have cassette recorders then.
Right. It was
You know, we'd
literally,
get in a room together and he would have this stuff in his head and he'd say, okay, try this. And we'd learn section by section. And then as we'd put stuff together, if it didn't sound like he wanted it, he would change it, you know? And we were all kind of amazed. I mean, that is another thing that made the band work, is that we all kind of united behind his music. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
how much of your own personality did you get to inject into these things? Did he pretty much have everything planned out for everybody, or were you free to
Well,
kind
you
of
know,
make up your own bass line sometimes?
it would depend. But I will say this, there's a point where, so when the Dregs broke up and Steve started the Steve Morse band, and then you had Jerry Peak playing bass,
Hmm.
and then Dave LaRue.
Hmm.
And for each one of those things, the role of the bass was different. You know, so Steve is very kind of cognizant of who he's playing with. So he would write things that I would play because he knew that I would play that way, you know?
Sure.
And so a lot of this stuff was very natural to me. But you know, whenever we would get into a groove thing or some kind of rock thing, it would be just like, okay, try some stuff, you know.
Was it always compositions that he came up with, or were there ever times where you guys just jammed and turned it into a song?
That didn't really happen very often. I can't think of when that would happen. When Steve and I were in high school, we would do that. We would just, you know, me and him and his brother would just jam for hours, you know, and come up with stuff.
How did you
And
guys meet, and how did that original Dixie Grit come together? Were you all down in Augusta? Was that where it was at, or?
yeah, so the story for me is I was in the 11th grade, and a friend of mine in Atlanta went to Augusta to play like a rock concert in 1969.
Hmm. I was two.
And yeah, and he came back, and when I found out I was moving to Augusta, I told him, and he said, "Oh, we just played there." He said it was horrible. He said, "But there's this 15-year-old kid who could play just like Jimmy Page. His name's Steve Morse. You should look him up." You know,
Uh-huh.
and so that was kind of when I got there. Augusta was very different than Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta was a progressive city even back then.
Kind of metropolitan, yeah.
Yeah. You know, and Augusta was like, what?
Kind of out in the sticks.
Yeah. You know, and just, I mean, it was very backwards. I'll just have to say it like that. Um,
Now, were you from there originally, or no?
no, no. Well, I moved to Atlanta when I was 12
Okay.
or 11 or 12. And then I moved, of course, with my parents to Augusta when I was 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, you know, that's when I met Steve. He was actually in my French class. And, you know, I just heard him say something that wasn't Southern. And we just started talking. He said, yeah, I got this band. It's called Nobody's Children. Yeah, you should come by and hear us, you know. And I think the first song I heard Steve play was American Woman by Guess Who. And he
Okay.
sounded just like the guy in Guess Who, you know, I mean, the
Yes, sir,
same
with
tone
that
and everything.
fuzz tone kind of
Yeah.
lead and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
And then, you know, so one thing led to another and we started a band.
Yeah. And who inspired you to play bass initially?
Well, definitely. Um, so at a very early age, I fell in love with the Ventures,
Okay.
and I had like a paper route or some way I was making money, and I can't quite hear you, but I assume it's a Ventures tune.
You know, A minor G F
Yeah.
E.
And I got all these Ventures albums, and then I started playing with bands in high school and whatnot. But there were a couple that things that really tweaked me. The first Led Zeppelin album,
Oh yeah,
right? And Cream.
sure. Love Cream.
Yeah. So when Disraeli Gears came out, Sunshine of Your Love, right?
Hmm.
Man, I remember the first time I heard that in headphones, and it was just like, wow, that's
Was that kind
amazing.
of your bass epiphany? Because I think for a lot of
Yeah,
people, when they're younger, you don't even really notice the bass. And then
yeah,
one day, I know for me, I think it was when I got a hold of a Yes album. It was like, boy, that bass is loud. And Black
yeah,
Sabbath was like that too. It was like, I love this. I love this band because I can actually hear the bass, you know?
yeah. So Cream, Jack Bruce, was it for me forever, really.
Oh, yeah.
And I bought every album that he ever did when it came out, and I just thought he was great.
Yeah. Great singer too. Operatic
Yeah,
tenor, you know? Wow.
yeah. And the live Cream with Spoonful and all that stuff. I mean, oh man, that was just incredible.
Should have been a double album, you know? As much as they jammed, I can't believe that.
Wheels of Fire, right? I mean, it was double album.
Oh, that one. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
There's a live album that came out after Goodbye that had,
Oh,
some stuff on it, but it was like scratch the surface pretty much,
yeah.
compared to all the improvs that they do on any
Oh
given
man,
night.
I'm afraid we are going down a rabbit hole here. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know
better
what.
back out a little bit.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into playing Alembic? And how did you get such a cool tone? I always thought you had kind of a, for lack of a better word, kind of a rubbery tone, if that makes any sense.
Well, okay. So,
Was that a pedal or was that just you?
no, I'm pretty sure that any bass I play would sound like me playing it. But the Alembic was something I read about in Guitar Player magazine, and I was just like, wow, this sounds incredible. I mean, it was like the way it was described and all this kind of stuff. And there was a music store in Charlotte, North Carolina, that carried them,
Oh.
Reliable Music. And
And what year was this?
this was 1975.
Okay. And they were kind of
Yeah.
new around then, weren't they? Kind of the new
Well, they've
thing.
been, yeah, pretty new in terms of getting distribution. They had
Right.
started making custom basses and things. I mean, my soundbite was I had a $200 Volkswagen and a $2,000 bass, in
Right.
1975, and because I cared about it. But I went to Reliable, and I was like, man, this is it. I got to have this.
Now, had you heard anybody else? Because people like Stanley Clark had it. John Paul Jones eventually went there.
Right.
Or did you get yours before all those guys got hip to it?
Yeah. Well, I got mine before I had heard anyone that had one that I knew. I mean,
Okay.
Stanley Clark, pretty quick after that, I realized what he was doing.
Mhm.
Um, and we had we did a 10-day tour with Stanley Clark, which was amazing back in the day. And he's a very friendly guy. I don't know if you've ever talked to him.
I have not had the pleasure yet, but I hope to.
Yeah, no, he's a wonderful person. I mean, I haven't talked to him in 40 years, but the one thing he did say to me was, yeah, man, you ought to get a short scale bass and some, light gauge strings.
Were you using flats back then, or did you get into the whole roto sound as soon as that came along?
No, I liked the bright flats. I liked the GHS bright flats. And for this tour that we just did,
Mhm.
about a year before that, I was telling Richard Coco at Labella, I was like, man, I really used to like these strings. And he said, oh, we got these are some things we're trying. They're these super steel flats or super flats, or I forget what they called them. And they were like a polished nickel
Mhm.
flat. And I loved them. I still have like a couple sets and I've got them on my basses now, but it's like that to me was a really good sound. I really like that. It's not like dead flat, but it's not like that bright,
Zingy
loud one.
sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you never really went for that roto sound, even the 70s. You went for something a little flatter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you listen to the Dregs albums, that sound is
Yeah, it's not that bright toppy sound
no.
that everybody seemed to be
Yeah.
gravitating towards back then. But it's good. I think it's warmer and rounder. You
Well, I mean, I like it. I mean, not everybody does. And plus playing with a pick, um, it had a particular kind of effect, which I really like. I mean, it made a lot of clarity in the notes, and I like that mid-rangey sound. I mean, I do like a deep tone too, but the music we were doing, it just, it was like to have that sort of short, attacky kind of thing without the bright, ringy,
Right.
seemed to really work.
Yeah. Well, it was a great sound. What kind of amplification were you using? I had a question in the chat room if you could talk a bit about the evolution of bass amplification, just in brief, kind of while
Yeah.
talking about
Okay.
your
So,
gear.
all right. I think this is kind of interesting. I have no idea how this happened. Okay. But I used to, the way you would find information in the old days was through magazines and whatnot, right?
Sure.
Somehow I found these in a magazine. I found these Serwin Vega cabinets that had an 18 speaker and a folded horn. They were about, I don't know, 3.5 feet high, and an 18 folded horn and an 8-inch front facing speaker in the middle. And I thought, oh, this has got to be it, and I went to, there was like a music store in Augusta, mom and pop store. I said, can you get these guys? And they went and they found out, yeah, we can get them. We can special order them for you. And I was like, okay, great. Yeah, do that. And also get me these power amps. Serwin Vega made power amps that were like 150 watts or something.
Hmm.
So I had two of those, and that's where it all started. I really liked the low end that came out of those things, and then sort of tweaking up the mid range. And then I went into an Alembic preamp and 12s on top of the 18s, with a crossover.
And this was what you were rocking back in the 70s with the
Yeah,
Dregs,
it should
or?
be like the early 70s, so around 75, I started, this was like, so when the band, oh, and then there was a period of time where we had a drummer who was also a cabinet maker, and I had him custom make me 4 15-inch cabinets.
Oh, nice.
When I got rid of the 18s, and he built me these things, and then I had 12s for that. And I've always been into the biamp thing. And then when GK came out with the 800 RB, I love those things, and I got like 4 of them, I think. And at the time, I also got into these bag end. I don't know if you've ever heard of bag end.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, well, they're kind of a high end gear, and they made these cabinets, and so I've always been into the biamp. Let's just say that, full range crossover, so you get a nice thumpy low. Makes it kind of hard if you play real loud for the guy mixing, So nowadays, you want less on stage. But that was it,
Yeah.
And there's infinite things now. I mean, when they came out with the small Class D amps, I think that was great. The digital amps are wonderful, for bass, because it's just clear. It's just. I mean, I've never been. I understand why people like a thing you just plug into and it sounds good, But I've always liked just having the flexibility to tune it exactly how I want it.
Sure. What were you using on the most recent tour with the Dregs?
Yeah, so I didn't have anything suitable because I hadn't been touring forever. So I started looking at kind of more like a PA kind of rig, and do you know who Travis Larson is?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I've
Travis is a
seen him.
great guy. He's a really great guitar player.
Sure, he reminds me a bit of Steve, actually.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyhow, Travis introduced me to this guy from Electro Voice, And I've been looking at some of their gear because, again, I just wanted something that was going to be that I could tune exactly how I wanted it, you know. So I ended up with an 18 and two single 12 cabinets with tweeters, just kind of like a little column, you know, PA column.
Mm-hmm.
And then, excuse me, I used a Line 6 Helix for my main preamp.
Oh yeah, a lot of
Just
folks
go
are
right
using
into
those.
these powered speakers. And then the only other thing I did was I added a parametric that was a Tech 21. I forget what they call it, but it was basically a little parametric
Mm-hmm.
box. And so wherever we went, I would use my straight sound, but then I would just have this parametric if I needed to tweak it a little bit for that room.
I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
And bass wise, it seems like I saw you mostly playing like a Modulus 5 string. Is that what that
That's right.
was?
Well, it's a 6. Yeah.
Yeah. What inspired? I didn't see like the night I saw you guys, you didn't break out the Alembic at all, but later I saw some pictures of you using it. So I'm wondering how much you used it versus the Modulus.
Okay. Well, so the Alembic, so first off, before we got started, I told you about my computer thing, right? Well, the thing I didn't tell you was that there was a point in my life where I basically got down to having nothing but my guitar and a car, you know? And so I had sold my Alembic, and I sold it to a guy who I was giving some lessons to in the Bay Area. And then about 3-4 years ago, he reconnected with me. Oh yeah, I still got your bass. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. And he said, but I had to have some work done on it. Something happened to the neck, and so I had the whole neck replaced, and then I had all this inlay put on it, and all this stuff, you know, with the bass. And I was like, oh, that's incredible. Then about a year or two after that, he called me back and said, hey, I got some real bad health problems and I need to make some money. Do you want to buy this bass back? And I was like, man, you should sell it for as much as you can get for it. And I'm not going to want to give you what you could probably get for it,
True. Right.
you know, but I'll help you try and sell it. I'll put it up on my website and blah, blah, blah. And a guy bought it from him. When he found out that we were doing the Dregs tour, this guy, Rob, he calls me up and says, or sends me an email, says, hey, if you want to use the bass, I'll loan it to you. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Okay. And I wasn't going to do it, but then he was really, he was really,
He really wanted to see you play it.
it was, I'm not sure if it was that so much as he just wanted to be helpful, you know?
Right.
And I thought, okay, well, this is cool. There is one song which uses the bright sound, which is Twigs Approved, which, you know,
Right.
it's just me kind of thumping on it. And that song with round wounds sounds really great.
Sure. I can see that.
So for that song, I played the Alembic,
Oh, okay.
and
did
that
that
was
come
the same
like
bass.
did he hook up with you somewhere mid-tour? Because I don't remember seeing it when you played Atlanta. You did 2 dates in Atlanta. You did one early in the month and
Yeah.
then you came back. And I saw the first one actually.
Okay. Well, it's possible that on the first couple of gigs, I was so freaked out.
So didn't want to change
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
mid.
You know,
Yeah, I
and
can understand
but
that.
for most of the tour, I did use it on Twigs Approved because I like telling the story of like that was the original bass that I used on that album.
And how different did it seem after you did change the neck and all that? Did it feel different to you?
Um, well, I mean, I'm so used to playing a 6-string now. The 4 strings just feels naked.
Sure, it just seems like nothing,
And
right?
yeah, you know, but it also felt very normal to me. I really like Jeff Gould is the guy who makes the graphite bases that I use. You know, he's the guy who founded Modulus Graphite, so it was really
Sure.
like Modulus bass,
Great
but it's
stuff.
his thing. And I just find those bases so comfortable.
And they're really tough, the atmosphere will not affect them, you know,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
great.
it's cool. And he's made some improvements since Modulus on the G Gould stuff. He now has you know, truss rods in them, and he's always got really amazing wood. I guess I did that back then too, but I'm looking at my bass right now. So
It's like, hey, pick me
yeah,
up. Well, cool. Well, let me see what else I got here. So the original, The Great Spectacular is one that you guys recorded at school. Am I right?
yeah. University.
1975-ish. Tell us about getting signed to Capricorn. And did you guys feel like you had a kind of affinity with your Southern brethren that were on that label, or did you feel like you were kind of something totally different?
Well, we tried, right as after Steve and Alan and Rod graduated, we were living in Augusta and trying to make it, and we really wanted to get a record deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't know anything, so we just started playing anywhere we could. We played around Augusta. I mean, I think I booked the band a lot in that first year just by calling clubs around the South. We didn't have a booking agent or anything.
Sure.
We did get a manager, a guy who actually started taking on that role, and he found places for us to play. But Steve and I went to New York. You mentioned the pilotness. He rented a plane.
When did he start flying? Just out of
He
curiosity.
started flying when he lived in Miami. And there's a couple of trips that we took when we were in college that are just hilarious in a lot of ways. We flew to Bermuda one time, the Bahamas, and we also flew to Bermuda, and it was just crazy.
And you didn't get stuck in the triangle. That's good.
No, I know. But we flew to New York. Steve and I did. He basically got the money together to press up the Great Spectacular after we recorded it in Miami. We got, the pressings. Let's go to New York. Let's get a record deal. We flew up there. We couldn't even quite get to New York because the weather was so bad. We ended up landing in New Jersey somewhere and taking a bus in, and we knocked on every record company door, and nobody responded. I mean, I think Steve probably still has a collection of rejection letters. We were just naive. We thought, okay, well, let's see who's on the list here. Elektra Records. Okay, let's go there. Columbia Records. Let's go there. And I remember one, receptionist saying, well, we don't just take people in off the street, but let's just say that at some point, Chuck Leavell heard us play in Nashville, and he was like, you guys are great. You got to get on the Capricorn. And he went and told Phil Walden, and Phil said, well, get him a gig in Macon and I'll come see him play. And he did. And then the next day our manager said, okay, they want to sign you. And we're like, oh, it's unbelievable. It just was like the most incredible thing. Yeah. We actually had an almost signing with Al Cooper.
Oh, really? You're the guy.
Yeah, where we played, again, we were playing in Nashville at the Exit Inn. He came and saw us, and we didn't know anything. I mean, we've been beating around the South, and all I remember was Steve was like, they made us an offer, but like Al wanted all the publishing, and the rest of us, other than Steve, didn't know what that meant.
A lot of people back in those days didn't. And
but he did. He said, we can't do it. We can't do that.
Right, exactly. I did, like, ask the guys in Kansas. The deal they signed originally was awful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually a really terrible deal. I mean, it was like basically a 15-point deal, but Al was going to get 7 points and the band was going to split the rest. And then he also wanted all the publishing. But I can't fault him for that. At least he liked the band.
Sure, absolutely. He saw the potential. What kind of groups did you guys play with back when you were touring back then? You ever on weird bills where they were just like, where you guys just smoked them and they were like, what is this,
Well, I think about Nashville. We actually opened up Freddie Hubbard once.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Red Clay.
Which would be nice, except it was very weird because we were the Dixie Dregs opening up for a jazz legend,
Right.
and basically everyone who was there to see the jazz legend and not us.
Right. So you didn't quite win them over that night, or?
We didn't get shouted off the stage, so that was good. We also had a gig with Muddy Waters, which was actually really pretty freaking cool.
That's interesting.
And the crowd loved us, and they loved Muddy and they loved us. So that was cool. That was in Boston, though.
Nice.
so those are some kind of odd pairings. We had some really good ones. I mean, we did get to play with ZZ Top and
Did you ever do any bills with Kansas?
no.
No. Okay, interesting. What did you think when Steve wound up with them?
Pardon me?
What did you think when Steve wound up with them in the 80s?
Well, I mean, again, I don't know what was going on in the band. I mean, Rich is a great guitar player, so.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, Carrie was out of there, and they needed that second guitar player. So
Oh, okay. So he was in the band still.
Rich was there. Steve, Carrie left. He kind of became born again and started that Christian group AD,
Right.
and so they had it was basically Walsh and Ehart and Williams, and the bass player that Walsh had been working with in his band Streets, Billy Greer, who's still their bass player to this day.
That's right. He's a really good musician too.
He's awesome. And yeah, it was an interesting time, It's like, it was.
I'm not really familiar with what they did. I mean, Steve Walsh was really great, and I mean, he did in the 90s, he did a solo album that I thought was really wonderful. I can't remember the name of it, but
Glossolalia.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very into Tool and stuff like that, and kind of a harder edge than Kansas was willing to get into at the time.
Yeah.
He was writing some of those songs, and they're just kind of like, it's just a little heavy for us, which is kind of ironic because now you listen to some of the stuff on their most recent album that came out last year, and it's pretty darn heavy. So
yeah.
Everybody comes around to it eventually, I guess. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. I've been a big Kansas fan. I grew up in Topeka, so they're kind of like my hometown kind of heroes, I guess, in a way.
Well, I mean, they were a great band back then for sure.
And it seemed like it wasn't a big stretch. They had some compositional kind of similarities between Morse and Livgren, and I think they kind of hit it off. And they're both pilots as well, so I think they had a lot of things in common.
Yeah.
Though they weren't in the band at the same time, I think Steve was a big fan anyway. So.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yeah.
Tell us about that cover shot for Free Fall. How did you guys do that? And where? Obviously, you didn't jump out of a plane. It looks like it's all cut and pasted. But did you jump on a trampoline or something?
Okay, so keep in mind, we're like a bunch of hicks from Georgia. And we go to LA to record our first record. And none of it is in our control, right? We signed a deal with Capricorn. When we signed with Capricorn, we said, hey, you should get Ken Scott to produce us.
Yeah, famous producer. And remind folks who some of the other things he's done.
Well, first off, he did My Vision Orchestra, many albums. I think he did the first 2 or 3 albums. He's done Jeff Beck. Supertramp. He's got an insane David Bowie. He's got an insane discography. But and by the way, his book is a really interesting book about the music at that time and what was going on.
I'd like to check that out.
Yeah, but we wanted him because he did Birds of Fire and Intermounting Flame.
Of course.
Like, man,
right.
We could sound like that. That would be great.
That's like.
But they got us this guy, Stuart Levine, who was actually a really cool guy and has a very interesting history, but he was not, he was more of a jazzer. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know anything about him, but they were like, yeah, no, he'll be great. He'll be great. So we go to LA and there's a whole story about that album, but, let's just say when they did the photo shoot, there was somebody, some woman from the record company who came and met us and said, okay, we got to get you guys some clothes. Okay. And they took us to some shop on, Hollywood Boulevard or something. And they bought us all this stuff, all the satin stuff that Steve's wearing and, the funny outfits. And then they took us out to the airport and they had a jet set up there with boxes. And they were going to, they said, okay, stand on these boxes, basically a set, right? For us to look like we're jumping out of a plane.
Right.
And that's what we did. And that's how they did the cover. The only thing that we got on there that we thought was kind of cool was we had Twigs on the back cover, looking at his watch, which was kind of an inside joke for us because there's a whole story about Twigs and his influence on the band. And he came into into the band. Like one day he just came into one of our club gigs because of the Chuck Leavell connection. And he was like, okay, I got a truck. I know what to do to make you guys roadworthy. I'm going to start working for you.
Okay.
And we're like, well, we don't have any money. He said, I don't care. You will, someday you will.
It's a good
And
attitude. Yeah.
yeah. And so he sort of took us under his wing, and we had this whole thing where we learned all about what it was like to be on the road and what was Twigs approved. And Twigs was, about being on time. He was a professional.
I've heard a story about him having Dwayne Allman's Les Paul and begging Steve to use it on a track, and he finally used it on the slide solo on Twigs Approved.
Yeah. I don't think he had to beg him to use it, though.
He's like, Dwayne's guitar.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's very cool. Oh, great tune.
And Twigs, we used to do things like, we did a version of this Allman Brothers song called Black Hearted Woman. We'd get Twigs up on stage and play it with us.
Sure.
Because we would just do stuff like that because we thought it was cool.
It's a great way. It has one of their little odd metered intros too, kind of like whipping.
Yeah.
That's a pretty neat one. Tell me a bit about signing with Arista. Did Capricorn just kind of go under and that you?
Oh, God.
Was it painful?
It was painful. We were on the road in California, and we were just touring in support of the album, The Night of the Living Dregs. And what that meant was we would play wherever we could. We toured a lot, but we wouldn't make any money. So we had to have quote unquote tour support. And the record company would periodically send us a couple $1,000s, to help us cover hotel rooms. It was our money, our future money.
Right.
But they would send it to us. And one day we called and there was, line's been disconnected. And that was it. And we were like, what happened? And our world just kind of blew up. And then we had a manager at the time who said, okay, I'm going to get you guys on another label. He managed to get Clive Davis interested. We played a gig at the Bottom Line in New York. Clive came and saw us. And, oh, by the way, Robert Fripp was at that gig too.
Oh, nice.
And I went and spoke to Robert Fripp then. I'm sure he doesn't remember, but.
Did you know that Robert Fripp's the one that gave Al Stewart his first guitar lesson? They lived
really?
in the same neighborhood. And he said, forget everything I ever taught you and you will be famous.
Nice.
Like, leave those whole tone scales alone.
Well, so we signed a deal with Arista, but what was really, it was really fascinating was, so the contracts come back and the contracts say, in the event that you're sued, you're going to owe us all the money back and you guys will be responsible for everything.
That's a heck of a deal.
And we're like, what? How can this even be? But our manager, said at the time, go ahead and do it. You got to do it. You have no choice. Otherwise, you're not going to be signed by anybody.
Right. So you did it.
So, we did, and it sort of worked out in a sense.
How do you feel about those albums compared to the ones you made with Capricorn?
Well, I think they're fine, but Arista didn't know what the hell they were doing, unfortunately. I mean, Clive is Clive, so you can't really say much about him. We did have a meeting with him where he said he was very complimentary to the band. He liked the band. Obviously, he wouldn't have signed us, but he played us a cut off of Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow. Like, okay, here, listen to this, and we're like, well, yeah, we know what that is.
We've heard this, right?
Yeah. What are you saying? We didn't understand what he was even telling us. He was just basically saying, well, it's not that you need to do that. You need to do something that makes you feel like you feel when you hear that, and it was actually kind of good advice, I think, in retrospect. I mean, because again, it depends on what you're trying to do. We're trying to be artists. And we thought that by being artists, we would make a lot of money. But that's not really what happened, right? We were artists and we didn't make a lot of money.
Right.
You know, we could have made a lot of money, perhaps, had we decided to sort of shift things in different ways, but we
Yeah.
were not conscious of doing that. So, you know,
Was it the label's idea to get vocals on industry standard?
yeah. So I don't actually remember. At the time that album came out, rock radio had turned into formula radio.
Hmm.
There was this guy in Atlanta. His name escapes me. Lee Abrams.
Yeah.
He was a
Okay.
programmer. And what happened was all of these radio stations around the country, this was around the time of MTV and all this stuff, right? So it
Mhm.
used to be that radio stations were independently sort of looking at the charts, using their own minds to figure out what they wanted to play, all this kind of stuff. This guy, Lee Abrams, came up with a program list. Okay, play these songs this much in this order for this week. And hundreds of radio stations around the country bought into that. And basically, there was no way to get jammed into that list, right?
Right.
So we thought, well, if we do vocals, at least they won't be able to say, well, we don't, you know, we don't program instrumentals. I mean, that was basically the thing. We're not going to program instrumentals. So the only way people are going to hear you is on college radio, you know. Well, that's not good. So we had met Patrick Simmons from the Doobies. He's a great guy, loved our band. Steve Walsh, same thing, you know, we knew them. Hey, what if we got these guys, you know, and oh yeah, and we did a gig with Santana in Atlanta. That's where we met Alex
That's where you
Lidgerwood.
met Alex. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so we knew all these guys, and you know, somehow the topic came up, well, what if we got these guys, these, you know, rock stars to sing on something, you know, and okay, let's try it, you know.
Yeah.
It's our sixth album. Every album is just about doing exactly the same. We're not really going anywhere. We're not gaining traction, you know.
Right. And the next thing you know, you're on American Bandstand hanging out
Yeah.
with Jeff Clark.
Yeah.
Any memories of that you could share?
Yeah, it was just bizarre.
Bet.
I mean, American Bandstand was kind of cool because it was such a legendary show.
Sure.
I mean, it's ridiculous because we were lip syncing, you know.
Right.
And
Crank it up.
yeah, you know, and okay, so we're supposed to sit here and look like we're playing. Yeah, that's what you do. Okay, you know, weird, but why can't we just play?
You were playing Steinberger around then. Were you a friend of Ned's? Were you kind of in on the bottom floor on those?
Yeah, yeah. So same thing with Steinberger. I saw an article in Guitar Player about the Steinberger bass, and you know, in it, it talked about that he had made 4 basses, and who had it? Well, there were 3 other bassists that had bought a Steinberger, and I actually tracked him down. I think I might have called someone at Guitar Player and said, "Can you give me this guy's number?" And I called him up and I said, "Well, this sounds really interesting. I'd like to get it." And he was like, "Well, okay, I have 1 left. I'll sell it to you." You know, it was like $1,500 back then, which was a lot of money, but I was like, "Yeah." And so that's how I met Ned. I mean, I just called him up and said, you got one? I want it. And Tony Levin had one, and I forget who else had 2 other guys.
You know, it seemed like that was kind of early on. I mean, by the mid 80s, they were everywhere, but you know, 80,
No, yeah, it was very early
81,
on.
82, you were one of the first guys to use it. And I think the
Absolutely.
guitar version was always more popular than the bass, but
Well, the bass really, you know, Sting got one, and
Geddy Lee,
yeah,
he did a whole
it
album.
definitely took off.
Yeah.
Ned very graciously kind of gives me some weird credit because he said that at the NAMM show, I think it was 1979, we were scheduled to play. It was like our first gig at the NAMM show. And first off, they wanted me to play a Fender bass. And I was like, nah, I'm playing my Alembic. And oh, by the way, I have this other bass I'm going to play. And Ned said that the day before we played, that people were just walking by, no one would talk to them. And then after we played, they jammed the booth.
I bet. You know, it's funny. My good friend, old bass player friend, John Christopher, who is a huge Dregs fan, I might add. He's in the chat room right now. Hey, John. He said
Oh,
Ned Steinberger credits Andy with doing his fledgling company a lot of good at its very beginning. So
yeah,
kudos. Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's a, this guy wrote a book about Ned. I mean, it's like a little bio book, Steinberger,
Mhm.
and it's actually really interesting. I mean, again, if you like arcane histories of people, Ned is a great guy, and but this story is pretty cool. And I remember when I went to the factory where they had just started sort of ramping up production. It was in Brooklyn, and it was like a giant warehouse, like a 5-story brick building. And we went into this elevator, and it was like an open freight elevator. And you go up the story, and the first 2 or 3 floors were filled with women at sewing machines,
Huh.
like a almost like a sweatshop, so
What
factory,
were they cranking out?
just clothes.
Hmm. Okay.
This was back before all that stuff got shipped off, right?
Right.
And Ned was showing me, and this guy Hap Kuffner, who was also part of this whole thing, they were showing me how they were making the bases. It was pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, that's yeah, that was, it's kind of an 80s relic at this point, but they were really well made and had a unique tone that was kind of dark. I would is how I would kind of describe it.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I don't know. I got into the EMG pickups on the Steinberger, and I have not looked back. I mean, I've used EMGs ever since, and that's another kind of sound that I really like. It's
that
just something
active kind of
that,
punchy sound.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of flexibility there.
So, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the three different Dregs violinists over the years and how, playing with them kind of differed. And I guess you got to play with Jerry on that tour that you guys opened for the Dregs. So,
Yeah. Well, first off, Alan, he, let's see, how do I put this? It's really strange. Alan, the sound that Alan had was, again, coming from a very classical thing. I mean, he was really into, Jean-Luc Ponty and that kind of thing. But at the same time, he had a very deep classical background. Um, he played in a really, he had his own style. I thought he was really, powerful and sweet, and
oh, very much. Yeah.
had a lot of really lyrical, emotional kind of content in his playing. Um, so, but everyone is more than they're playing. They're also a personality,
Right.
and his personality is so much a part of the band in those early days that it's hard to separate it from him. But at some point, Mark entered the picture, and without going into a lot of personal detail on that, we heard Mark play with David Grisman when he was like 20,
Hmm.
and he was a phenomenon then.
Sure.
And so working with Mark was really interesting, just because he was such a prodigy,
Oh, yeah.
and his he was also really kind of introverted and shy and quirky, and he had received a lot of attention from when he was really young. So it's funny because I kind of reconnected with him about 5 or 6 years ago when he was playing here in Phoenix. Um, and I just it was funny. I went up to him because I hadn't talked to him for many years, but I brought he was doing a meet and greet afterwards, and I brought one of these Dregs albums up that the industry standard that he played on. I said, "Hey, so you want to sign this?" And it took him about a half a second. He was like, "Oh my God," and so anyhow, we started talking again, and he, now, I mean, his history now is just spectacular, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's incredible. And he's just of course I remember him as this young kid who just was a monster on violin and guitar, right? I've got a great picture of the three of us, me and Steve and Mark. You know, they're both playing guitars. I'm playing the bass. We're kind of like lined up like Molly Hatchet, you know.
Okay, yeah, yeah. He's a
And
great guitar player too. You
oh
know.
yeah, amazing. So it's been great to see what he's done with his talent. I mean, he's just amazing. And then Jerry, of course, is just in a class by himself also. You know, it's funny. I think without going into a lot of detail, violin is a very difficult instrument to play. And I think that it can create a kind of tortured spirit in someone, if that makes any sense, you know, because there's so much in it. You know, it's not like, you know, you can pick up a guitar and make a noise and it's kind of cool, right? An electric guitar or a bass or something, right? It's not too far from nothing to something,
Right.
you know. Violin is completely different.
It's like climbing a mountain.
Yeah, you know, and so I feel really lucky to have come in contact with all those people, and you know, and what they've done in music is, you know, incredible.
Yeah. Well, Jerry's going to be on the show next month.
Oh, that's cool.
So I'm looking forward to chatting
Well,
with him.
you know, I mean, anytime I've ever heard him play anything, it's been incredible, and the power in his playing is just
He's got a
shocking.
really unique tone too. I always wondered, it almost sounded like a wah-wah that had been cocked open. And
Yeah.
did he use anything like that, or was it just
No, I think it's just the sound that he, you know, it's like people get their sound and they go for it. You know, he's got that distorted, you know, sustainy thing. A violin has natural sustain with the bow, but there's something about the distortion that he uses that just makes it, you know, really incredible. Did you hear any of his solo albums? The one with who's the guy who plays harmonica?
uh, John Popper?
No, no,
Hoots, what's his name?
no, not him. It's another guy who's kind of underground, but Jerry did an album with Steve Smith and this guy, I think his name's Levin. I can't remember. It's a great album though.
Okay.
I mean, it's like
Keep an eye out
monster
for that. I'll
player.
have to ask him about that.
Yeah, look for that. It's really a really wonderful album. And of course, the thing he did with Jan Hammer to Like Children.
Oh yeah, that's a wonderful record.
Yeah, I mean, these are old, you know, but
Yeah,
and it's funny too. I even seen Jerry's name pop up on some movie soundtracks and stuff.
Howard Levy.
Yeah, Howard Levy. That's right.
That's the guy. That's right.
Yeah.
A couple more questions about the Dregs, and then we'll move on and wrap it up pretty soon. Any memories of playing at the Montreux Jazz Fest? You know, there's not a lot of footage of you guys back in the 70s. That's probably the best footage I've seen. And
Yeah.
It's kind of a shame there isn't more. I would think there had to have been some cameras rolling here and there.
You know, you got to remember, it's not like it is now.
Right. It's easy now. You just hold up your phone. Back in the day, you had to bring a whole barrage to film.
Yeah. No, the Montreux thing was amazing. We met Ken Scott there. We practiced for, you know, 4 days, I think 3 or 4 days. I mean, we knew all the songs that we were going to do, but we sort of worked them out with Ken. And, you know, it was great. I mean, it was great because the audience responded so well to us. Of course, European audiences, particularly then, were much more open, you know, to music and being an instrumental band. You know, I mean, it was the jazz festival, right? But that was like at the time when rock was creeping in there, you know.
Oh yeah. Nowadays, Pearl Jam plays at the Jazz Fest.
Yeah, yeah.
So
really, well, I'm not surprised, but it was a great trip. I mean, you know, being in Switzerland, we played London. We played with Sea Level. Sea Level was.
I was going to ask. I adore Sea Level. I think they are so cool.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, all their albums, it's just wonderful stuff. And they kind of, you know, it's kind of like a blend of the Brothers meets the Dregs, you know.
Yeah.
A good place to be between, you know.
We did a lot of gigs with those guys. They were great.
Yeah, that'd be a great double bill.
Yeah.
very complimentary. Yeah. Did you guys ever get together and do like a massive Jessica jam or anything?
No, not that I can recall. I do remember, somehow Steve and me and Chuck and JMO got to jam once
Okay.
in the Capricorn studios.
Nice.
And that was a blast.
So have you been up on the remodeling of Capricorn and the rebirth of it?
I did see some of that on Facebook, and
Yeah.
yeah, that was pretty cool. They turned it into like a museum kind of thing, or is it an actual
I
studio?
think it's a little of both. Yeah. Yeah. So I was wondering the country influence, the Wabash Cannonball and all this. How did that become part of all this? Is it just because you guys are kind of from the South and you're down this way, or how
You
did that
know,
wind up in the mix, I guess?
that's entirely Steve's idea.
Because you guys do it so well. I mean,
He
like Pride
just
of the
liked,
Farm, get out of here.
yeah, he just liked that kind of thing. For some reason, he heard in his head a blend that included those elements.
Mhm.
And like you said, it's like Pride of the Farm. I mean, that's not a country song.
Not really, no, it doesn't. It's what I would classify as a barn burner.
Yeah. Well, there's clearly bluegrass influences in it, right? But like all of his compositions, there's parts in there that are just very intricate and you know,
Yeah,
but
well,
that was all him really. I mean,
yeah.
none of us had any kind of like draw to anything like that.
Well, it seemed like there was always like at least one tune like that on every album. Even into his solo album and trio albums, there's
Yeah.
always at least one little kind of blazing bluegrass number, and he does it so well. Please do. And then there's always kind of a nylon string classical kind of thing going on, a couple of those, and then everything else is the more big, grandiose group tunes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about a few different tunes that are kind of well known. I was wondering, how did Cruise Control become the anthem for the Dregs? What is it about that song that just seems to, I don't know, hold court over all the others in a way?
Yeah, it's really simple. People like a good beat.
Right, right.
And that one just has it. I mean, it's got a groove that is sort of relentless until we break it up. I mean, we broke it up with a little, transitional sections and everything, but just that one groove, do 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 do,
Right.
it's like everyone can relate to that right away.
It almost makes me think of like Fire from Jimi Hendrix, that kind of
Yeah.
chromatic, kind of crawling up to the root kind of thing.
Well, it's funny because I know where that actually came from. There was a band from Atlanta called Eric Quincy Tate that used to play in Augusta all the time at the Whipping Post, which is the club there that we played at a bunch. And they had a thing that was let's say it was inspiring to that groove.
Right.
It was like the same kind of thing where like you'd hear it and you go like this, and Steve really liked that, and so he kind of pulled from that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the original version has that almost kind of Irish kind of breakdown in the middle with all the layers of Brian May kind of guitar stuff. Was that just impossible to do live? So you guys just kind of
No. I mean, Steve would do, usually what we would do is every tour, like every kind of album that we would do, he would come up with something different for the breakdown.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would be an orchestrated thing. It would all start with something that was kind of amorphous, come down in tone, and then build up to this monstrous thing where we'd all come back in.
Right, or if you're trading off and the
Yeah.
the bars you trade get smaller every time you go around.
Yeah.
Kind of
That
thing.
was pure Ma Vishnu that
Yeah.
we stole that.
That's the crowd pleaser every time. That's always fun.
Yeah, but no, he would just he did stuff like that with the synthesizer and with delays and stuff. I don't know if he did the Brian May thing exactly, but he was able to capture that stuff.
Very cool, because I don't think I've ever heard a live version of that. A friend of mine gave me a really interesting live album from you guys right around What If. I guess you did a tour and you went to Tucson, Arizona and played in a radio station.
Yeah, I've
Is that
seen that.
right?
You know, it's funny, right before the tour, I had these grandiose ideas of how we could sort of take the steam out of the you know, the illegitimate market, if you will, you know,
Or
the
the bootleg market.
the bootleg market. Yeah. And I got in touch with this guy who had literally collected everything that was ever bootlegged, including that concert, you know, and
Mhm.
he had found like the best versions of them and all this stuff. And he sent all that stuff to me. And I was talking to Steve about this. I was like, man, we should just put this stuff out, you know, because people are buying it, you know, which is just crazy. And he just, you know, it just kind of fizzled into like an idea that never, you know, never did anything. But I have heard all those things.
Yeah, I thought it sounded pretty good. I mean, it's kind of what you
Well,
would expect in that situation.
yeah, no, it was fine. I mean, we did live shows all the time, live radio stuff a lot.
Tell me about the tune "What If." I always thought that it always kind of responded. It was kind of like the Dregs "Cause We Ended as Lovers" kind of ballad. Was
Yeah, well, I don't know. You know, that song is unique in the canon of Dregs music because it's more the chords have more jazz notes in them than any others that I can think of.
okay.
It's also sort of more open, right, in terms of how we played it.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful piece of music.
That's a beautiful
It
piece of
really
music.
is.
I agree.
And I love that you and Mike Keneally did it at Prague Day. Yeah, that was cool to see.
Oh, you were there for that?
I actually wasn't there, but I saw some footage of it. I think a friend was there, like filming it live or something, because I remember watching it at the time, and it was like they're doing some drag stuff. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, Anthony at Make Weird Music had a house concert once with Michael Manring.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, in his living room, you know, and of course I went there and Anthony's like, "Hey, would you want to do something with Michael?" I'm like, "Well, okay." And then we got in touch and I said, "Well, let's do What If, you know, two basses." We did a
Okay.
version of it, just two basses. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. What if we did this on two bases?
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, such a beautiful tune. And then Odyssey, that was like one of the earliest tunes, right? You guys were playing that when you were
Yep.
teenagers, right? Did
Yep.
the arrangement change any later, or was it pretty much like that from the get go?
You know, honestly, I can't remember. I remember doing it, but I don't remember how we did it. Um, my suspicion is that when Alan got in the band, it changed, you know, when we were not a three-piece band anymore, then there were more parts.
Sure. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. How about Assembly Line? That seems like a bass tour de force. You know?
Yeah, it is. I can't remember how that actually came together, except that, again, that song, there's a little middle section there that pulls on a piece of music that we did when we were a three-piece band in high school. You know, there's a
Goes back
part of
that
it.
far. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And I'm guessing the groove, the relentless groove, kind of named it or inspired the name.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And I can't remember if, I mean, that may be one of those things where Steve said, here, do something like this. And, you know, or I can't remember if he gave me the exact thing. I think it was more like, do something like this. I want it to be like this. And, you know, it ended up being what it was. Um, there is an interesting thing, though, that you wouldn't know. When Stanley Clarke came up with School Days, right?
Sure.
Which was, you know, from a bass player's perspective, you know, iconic, right?
Big power chords.
Yeah. Um, I remember telling Steve, hey man, we should do something like School Days, with a bass thing like that. And he came up with Night of the Living Dregs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he may not remember it that way, but I remember sort of saying, it'd be cool if we had a bass song like that.
Okay.
And then he did it, and it's like, wow.
Very nice. How about travel tunes? That's one of the ones you wrote, right?
Yeah. So, I've written music my whole life, I guess. But it's kind of like in Spinal Tap, the first song the Spinal Tap guys did. It started like that. I mean, I never really know what I'm doing. I just sort of do it. And Travel Tunes was when, so you remember when 4-track, well, you're probably younger than this, but when the TEAC 4-tracks came out in the early 70s, that was when all of a sudden you didn't have to go into a studio.
Sure. That's magic,
Yeah.
honestly.
And, I'm not like Steve in the sense that Steve could write us, something in his head and it would be all there. But I had a Tascam, and so I had written a handful of songs, and we played them on occasion. I mean, we were kind of a democracy in the sense that everyone could bring stuff in and we would learn songs, especially in the early days, before we had record deal. We'd learn them and we'd play them. And if people didn't like them, they would just we'd stop playing them. But we usually ended up keeping all of Steve's songs because people liked them,
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the country thing, that's another thing, when you're playing music, you want people to enjoy what you're doing.
Sure.
And with the country stuff, especially in the South, people just love that. When we rip that stuff out, they would just go nuts. So it's not surprising that Steve would sort of continue to be drawn to that, through that time.
Sure.
But so Travel Tunes is something I wrote. I came up with all the parts except for the guitar parts, and Steve sort of layered on the chords and everything, especially at the end part. But all those other little parts I wrote on bass and just sort of recorded them in a 4-track, and then we played it. And we all had songs. When we got Ken to do our What If album, we played him all our songs, and everybody had a song. Rod had a song, Alan had a song, I had a song. I don't think Parrish had a song. But so there were 3 other songs that were not Steve's songs in the mix, but Ken picked my song. He said, okay, I want to do that one. We didn't tell him,
It was what? It was just,
Yeah.
okay.
He said, here's the songs we should do. And I was like, wow, okay, that's cool. Thank you.
I think it's a really unique composition. And, obviously it's got a different vibe than Steve's stuff. And just adds to the variety of that album. I think it might be my favorite album out of all of them.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's a unique album.
It really is. How about Leprechaun Promenade? Hear that coming together?
Again, Steve would just bring this stuff in and we would just play it. Now, some of the titles, I mean, he didn't come up with all the titles. I came up with quite a few of the titles. Sometimes we would just throw titles out there and see what stuck, kind of thing. I can't remember where that one came from, but, he would just bring this music in and we go like, okay, that's cool.
About a couple other ones here. How about Any Memories of Ice Cakes?
Yeah.
Was that considered for the most recent reunion tour at all?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it was brought up as should we do it, and Steve said no.
Okay.
Really, he was the deciding factor in all the songs because he didn't want to do something that was going to be that wasn't going to be as good as it was, I guess.
I can understand that. Okay.
Yeah.
But Night Meets Light. That's like one of the grand ballads, It's such a epic tune.
Yeah. Well, I thought it'd be great to do that song, but we did Day 444 instead.
Yeah, it's kind of in the similar contour
it's
ballpark.
That very ethereal, arpeggiated, massive melody sweeping out at the end, kind of thing.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah,
How about cat food? That's another bass tour de force, I think.
that's true. The other thing that kind of informed us, so that one was just something that they had done a lot of without in the recent incarnation of the Dregs, with Dave.
Yeah, that one was, again, kind of a bass solo spot for him.
Yeah.
And he kind of did his own thing, I think, when he
Oh,
got
totally. Yeah. I mean, he did an amazing job with that. Um, I mean, Dave is an incredible player, and he's very well schooled. I mean, he's one of those guys that can play anything. Honestly, I mean, I'm not a guy like that. I fit in the Dregs, but it's like it's a different level.
Dave seems just like the perfect yin to Steve's yang, you know.
Yeah.
Almost like the bass version of Steve Morse.
Yeah. Although I do like the sound of pick with Steve's music. I mean, obviously, because I
Sure.
grew up with that.
The attack with that and that
Yeah.
more round sound. How
Yeah.
about any
But,
thoughts on,
but I mean, Dave's solo on Ice Cakes, I've heard a couple of his solos on YouTube, and they're just
oh, well, just hearing them do that song as a trio alone is pretty
Yeah.
impressive to fill
That's
all that
crazy. I mean,
space.
it's crazy that they did that. So
Yeah.
anyhow, a lot of the songs that we didn't do were because they had recently done them. And
Yeah,
one of the things we wanted to do was either bring in the stuff that David Owski had played on or stuff that they hadn't really done recently.
makes sense. Did you ever meet Jerry Peak? Any thoughts on his
Yeah.
playing? He's a local guy. He was playing with a group here with David Ragsdale from Kansas back in the 90s and Rick Pruitt and a Pruitt Davis group. I don't know if you ever heard
You mean
those
he's
guys.
playing now?
No,
Like,
this is probably 15 or 20 years ago now.
oh yeah. No, because Jerry came to our gig in Atlanta.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I haven't seen him, God, in about 15 years now, but
No, it was great. I mean, he's he was amazing. And
yeah,
I think the story I heard was that he just didn't want to tour a lot.
yeah. Well, it's always a treat to see him play. He has a very unique style as well. It's, quite different than you or Dave,
He was definitely ahead of the curve, I would say, especially
Yeah.
with the tapping thing and all that. I mean,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a bit of that on that introduction album. Now that I think about it. And Stand Up, I guess he was on that one too. That almost seems like industry standard, but solo Steve, like another record where we need a singer on this.
yeah.
We need a hit, and
Well, yeah, Van. I mean that's a great album, though.
yeah, Van Temple sings Book of Dreams. That's probably my favorite tune on it. It's a really catchy tune.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that album was that was the first Steve Morse band, right?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
Rod. Yeah.
So they actually, it was funny when that album came out. I was like, wow, okay, because I remember learning a couple of those songs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We were kind of like, okay, well, what's next after this? And we started learning some songs, but then we kind of cut it off at that point.
Right. So that could have been another Dregs album if things turned out differently. Well, I think musically it's right in the same ballpark. There's a couple songs that are kind of different, but I'd say the majority was,
Well, when he really started writing for the trio, that changed.
I agree. And I think that's more like when Dave came along, that style really changed. And then his style with Deep Purple, it's like it's all a little more simplified, almost like you can't get too grandiose with Deep Purple. It just wouldn't be them. Although I think Steve has definitely pushed them more in a more
direction. They love him, man. They're I met those guys and that's a real band. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, well, I love Deep Purple anyway, but Steve joining was like a new lease on life for them, and I think they've done like 6 or 7 albums with him at this point. Quite a few, and I was just glad to see him land that gig. I thought, well, here's one of my favorite musicians that most of the world doesn't have a clue about. This is going to let thousands of people hear him that never have before, and give him a steady gig for the rest of his days if he wants it.
It's a trip, when you see these concerts on YouTube where he's playing in front of 30,000 people or something. It's like, oh yeah, that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, and he was like, everybody's always kind of like, first tour there was all these guys with bags of tomatoes and whereas
Yeah.
Richie Blackmore and all that, he's always kind of like the guy that steps in to replace some other well-known guy. Same thing
Yeah.
with Kansas, and it's like, well, you win him over in the end, though, at least I think so. So let me take a peek at the chat room real quick and we will wrap it up pretty soon here. I've thoroughly enjoyed this chat today, Andy. I appreciate you taking the time to
Fine, thank
make it
you.
happen.
We went kind of a long time, but it was an easy conversation. So
Yeah, well, that's how it goes with this thing. People are like, I can't believe you did a 2-hour show. And it's just like, you know, it just, I don't know, it just unfolds like that sometimes, and why hurry off?
yeah.
Yeah. Let's see here. Ask Andy about playing with Daryl Rhodes, the Love Boat Brothers.
Oh yeah.
What's up with that?
That's
Were you doing some yacht rock?
fantastic. That's really, I don't know who asked that question, but
Kevin Andrews, my good friend down here, bass player, he makes the funk fingers for Tony Levin.
oh yeah, yeah, cool.
Stick on your fingers, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Daryl, okay, so Daryl Rhodes, someone that I met him when I was in high school, and he had a band called the Celestial Voluptuous Banana. And I think that was my first kind of interaction with Daryl. Somehow over time, he was around at the same time we were. And so our paths crossed, continuously, I guess. I don't remember how the whole thing with the Love Boat Brothers came about, but, obviously it was Daryl's idea. And I think we just did one gig, but we might have done more than one. We might have done a couple.
And what kind of stuff were you playing?
Well, you'd have to go hear Daryl's music. Actually, if you go to his website, he's got an album that I played on. I think it's called Hamburgers from Heaven or something like this. Maybe that's a song. But Daryl is this guy. He's a real brilliant guy. He always had these kind of sarcastic, semi-humorous. I mean, it was a shtick. There was an act really around the whole thing, And Daryl's he had really long black hair and he always wore sunglasses. His eyes are like these crystal blue eyes, and he was always saying, "Yeah, I have to wear sunglasses everywhere because it hurts my eyes." I don't know if that's true or not, but so he had a whole vision thing going on. But it was very theatrical. Really cool, really interesting people, strange.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah. His band, by the way, was called Celestial Voluptuous Banana, Daryl Rhodes and the Ha Vishnu Orchestra.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And then the Love Boat Brothers.
The Love Boat.
Yeah. We did the theme.
Okay. That's very cool. Yeah. I was part of a local collective that used to do these tribute nights at a local theater or club. And every month we would do a different classic rock band's catalog. And a couple of times we went on a different path. Like one night we did a Spinal Tap night where we played all those songs from that silly movie. And another night we did all TV and movie music.
Nice.
And that was fun. And Love Boat was one of the ones that was in the mix there.
Very cool.
And yeah, that was one of the most eclectic and adventurous nights we did because it was all over the friggin' road.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Rockford Files and all that kind of cool stuff. It was
great.
Really an interesting way to go about it. Okay, how did you meet up with Henry Kaiser?
Okay, so
and
Henry,
what year was it?
Okay, so I moved to the Bay Area in 1984, I think. And I went to visit Jeff Gould at Modulus Graphite because they had a shop down there in San Francisco. And so I was in there talking to Jeff, and Henry walks in, and Jeff says, "Oh, you should meet this guy." And he introduced me to Henry, and Henry and I just started talking. So this was 1984. And Henry said, "Yeah, come on over, let's hang out." And we just became friends. I mean, Henry is, ever since that time, every interaction I've ever had with Henry, I've learned something new.
I love people like that.
Yeah, he is the most knowledgeable musicologist I have ever met. I mean, he knows so much about so many different kinds of music. And I could go on, but anyhow, that's the story of how I met him. I met him through Jeff Gould in San Francisco.
And how would you describe Henry's music for the uninitiated?
Oh my God. Okay, so, well, it's very sonic. So the guitar is all about the sound. If you've heard sort of free jazz,
Yeah, Ornette Coleman, that kind of ball.
yeah, or people like Derek Bailey, who's a guitar player, who was a
Mhm.
big influence on Henry. By the way, Pat Metheny did an album with Derek Bailey, which is very interesting. So, hats off to Pat for that.
I think he did one with Ornette as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, Metheny's another incredible guy for a lot of
master.
reasons. But,
Did you ever meet him when you guys were down in Florida?
oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna
Yeah,
say, how about Jocko? You ever
definitely.
really? Can you share a Jocko story with us?
Well, okay, so, I had been playing with Steve in high school. Jack Bruce was my idol. I kind of thought I was hot shit. I got into the University of Miami. I didn't know anything about anything except what we had done. And I became friends with a guy there. He said, "Oh yeah, we got to go hear this guy play." I was like, okay. So we drove way out to hell somewhere in Fort Lauderdale and go sit down in this old jazz club. This guy, Ira Sullivan, is playing trumpet, a typical thing, trumpet, drums, Fender Rhodes, and Jocko. And they just started playing and my jaw just dropped. I mean, Jocko was like this skinny guy with, high top tennis shoes, crew cut, and playing that stuff. And it was just like, oh my God. So that kind of,
Was he playing fretless even back then?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Jocko. I mean,
Yeah.
it was crazy. And so that was really interesting.
Did you get to meet him and kind of talk with him any?
Well, yeah, so I remember, again, I'm dumb, and I go up, man, what, how did you learn how to play like that? What do you do? And he was like, oh, I learned everything I know being on the road with Wayne Cochran. And I don't know if you knew who Wayne Cochran was. Wayne Cochran, the CC Riders. Jocko had a gig with him for like 6 months or something.
Okay. I know he did Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but I didn't hear about the other one.
This is like pre all that.
All that. Okay.
And Wayne Cochran was it's like a Blues Brothers kind of thing, but around the South. So, playing the Chitlin circuit or something,
Sure.
So I think Jocko was just kind of shitting me because he obviously learned how to play,
Right. It wasn't just on at the gig.
Yeah, but we had some conversations then, and there's also on YouTube, there's a video which doesn't have video, it's a recording of when Jocko sat in with the Dregs in Fort Lauderdale and played the bash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I basically announced the tune and then I get off the stage, and it's kind of funny.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, that's, Jocko has a tragic story at the end when, but during his rise, it was amazing, because he went from that club to, being in Weather Report. And I saw him play in Weather Report in Miami. And we ran into each other every now and again. I remember running into him at this hotel in Hollywood. And like a bunch of jazz rockers were staying there. McLaughlin was staying there. Jocko was there. Some other people. I mean, it was like a scene,
Yeah. Okay. Another question here. My friend David McCain is in the chat room. He says, Steve Morse once said that the Dixie Dregs played a tune called Flight of the Cockroach. Any studio recordings of this tune or any memories of it?
Definitely memories of it. It was all 16th notes, really fast. We played a lot of unison lines, and then there were a bunch of different stuff on it. I'm 100% certain I could not play it now. I don't want to tease people, but there is a recording of it that I have that some guy who was in the band at the time made a tape of it.
What era of the Dregs was this?
This was high school.
That early. Okay.
Yeah. So 1970, 71 kind of thing.
Okay. But it just wasn't something that made the cut for Free Fall, or was it even
No,
considered by that point?
no, it was too radical. Yeah.
Well, that's saying something. It's like,
I know. I've often thought about kind of like saying, wow, we should really pull that out and try and do it somehow. But it's more of a historical artifact at this point. It doesn't really matter. It's just.
okay. Any memories of Jimmy Herring sitting in with the Dregs in 2018?
Yeah.
Love Jimmy Herring. I've been a big fan of his since he was in the Aquarium Rescue Unit with Sipe and O'Teal and Colonel Bruce. And I love Jimmy's band. Jimmy, he's in that Morse ballpark or getting close. It's that. I like jam band music, but a lot of it bores me because it's very simplistic. And I don't care how great a guitar player is. If he's playing over 2 chords, he's going to bore me in about 5 minutes. So to have Jimmy's music is so harmonically rich and hip, that's right up my alley, so.
Well, he used to come and see us play. I mean, Jimmy tells a story of, he would come and see us play, and he was underage, but Jeff Burkhardt, our road manager, would get him in the back and say, okay, just stand there while they play, and so he saw us play very early when he was young.
Oh, what a treat, because he loved you guys. I mean, he's his guy, so to get a chance to see everything up close and personal at such a young age must have been really inspiring.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. He definitely has claimed that it had a huge impact on him.
Yeah. Any memories of the Super Dregs lineup? Did you guys have to do anything special to turn the band into such a large lineup to open for Dream Theater?
Oh, yeah.
You played guitar most of the night, didn't you?
Pardon me?
You played guitar most of the night.
I did, yeah. So that was, okay, so I had mentioned to you that I had a computer career. There was a point in time where so Frank Solomon, who's someone who now manages Dream Theater exclusively, but I think he co-managed them with the manager of Deep Purple at some point. And anyhow, it's always been a dream of Frank to have kind of the original band play together. He was also really instrumental, key, let's put it that way, making this last tour happen. But I think it had to do with kind of like, well, what could we do that wouldn't blow up the existing band, which was with Jerry and Dave.
Right. You didn't want to leave anybody out, so it was easier to bring everybody in. Okay.
Exactly. And, the Super Dregs, that's funny. So I think it was me. I was talking to Steve one day and I said, well, a lot of this stuff is just, you're doubling guitar. You're doubling the bass line on guitar on the record, but then you're playing, your melodies and solos over it. Maybe I could just play guitar and double the bass line, be a sort of a doubler, for some of this stuff. And he was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we could do that. And so that's what we did.
Yeah. I remember you playing bass like on Cruise Control, though.
Yeah. So we did the doubling thing. There were a handful of tunes that just Dave played on, a handful of tunes that just I played on, and then for a lot of it, I played guitar.
Okay. What'd you think of that Full Circle stuff?
Well, I love the one tune we did. I thought was a great song.
And Aftershock.
I think that might be
Sleeveless in Seattle.
Maybe that was it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we also did Aftershock, though.
I think both of them. I think there was at least a couple in there.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I do think that's a great album, but it definitely has a different character to it than the old band.
Oh, absolutely. It seems like it's very informed by Steve's trio writing.
Yeah. I wouldn't analyze it. I haven't bothered to analyze it at that level to see. I just remember thinking, wow, this is, it says the Dregs, but it really sounds different than that, that other thing that we did.
Yeah. Why don't you think there was ever any more Dregs music after that?
That's a good question. I mean, for me personally, I was very involved with my career. I had also had a band called Zazen, which was, even though it was part-time, we did a lot of music together, and that was with Joaquin Leebenu, who was another great guitar player. For me, I was just kind of busy doing stuff. The Dregs was always such a commitment,
Right.
and the Super Dregs thing actually happened. I've never heard it framed that way, but I'll just keep using it. It
The
happened
deluxe Dregs.
it happened actually at a perfect time when I was between contracts. It's like, okay, this contract is coming to an end. You guys are cool with me leaving? And they're like, yeah, we wouldn't want to keep you from doing that, and I was like, okay. So the timing was good for that.
It was a great tour. Now I got to say, I didn't stick around for all the Dream Theater because once you guys were done, I was satisfied. But it was a great pairing.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, Dream Theater is another amazing story though, because excuse me, the people that love Dream Theater really love Dream Theater.
Oh yeah.
And that is nothing to sneeze at, to have a fan base that you've developed that is so loyal,
Right, and they're pretty much do what they want. They're not
Yeah.
really forced by a record label to do anything in particular, and
Oh,
that's the ultimate career to have if you can.
yeah, exactly.
Call your own shots, and have a wonderful, adoring audience follow your every move. You can't beat
Right.
that. So yeah, they're amazing. I'm more into Dregs music. I'm not much of a metal head at this age. I probably would have dug them more in my 20s.
Yeah, I know what you're saying though.
But I totally respect the guys and their steadfast love of progressive rock.
Yeah.
They fly
Yeah.
that flag high, and it needs to be flown. It's even now it's a niche, and I think it'll
Yeah.
always be. So I try to do my bit to spread the word about it, but I'm just one guy.
Yeah.
One more question: how'd you meet Keneally?
Yeah. So Mike, it was a NAMM show, 1994, maybe. I was wandering around NAMM, and I stumbled on Dweezil's band
Oh yeah, okay,
doing a show in a booth, right?
right.
And that was Dweezil, Mike, Brian, probably
Amit.
Amit was there, and I forget who the drummer was. It was one of the guys that Mike plays with,
Okay.
Joe
Awesome.
Travers, or somebody like that. It's another great player. But so at the time, they did this thing that was a medley of
Classic rock kind of stuff.
about 70 songs, like 3 seconds of, whole lot of love.
Right. And then on to the next thing.
Yeah, then on to the next thing. And it was mind blowing. I mean, it was incredible. And the energy was so immense. And so I was just hanging around watching this. And afterwards, I was standing there, and I think Mike came up to me, or maybe I went up to him, and he didn't say anything about the Dregs. He said, "Oh, yeah, Andy, I heard that thing you did with Henry Kaiser, the Crazy Backwards Alphabet. That was awesome." And I was like, "Wow, that's kind of refreshing,
You didn't hear that very often, right?
Yeah. And so we struck up a conversation. He said, "Yeah, I know Henry, and we're talking about maybe doing something. Maybe we can play something together." And I was like, "That'd be great." And we did the Mistakes album.
Mistakes,
I
yeah.
think it's another really great album that no one's ever heard, but you can hear it if you go to Mike's website.
Okay.
And that's how I met him. And then we've been friends ever since.
Oh yeah. Well, one of my favorite artists. I became a fan of his in the early '90s. He had that album "Boil That Dust Speck."
Yeah.
And on it was a a homage to Steve Howe. It was like a crazy medley of like 3 minutes worth of Yes riffs and
Yeah,
licks, and one Trevor Rabin and one Peter Banks one in there if you listen very closely.
that's funny.
And I bought it for that, and I immediately became more enamored with the rest of the album. That's almost like a novelty kind of track in
Yeah.
hindsight, but yeah. And then I just got to know him. I started a website about progressive rock about 20 years ago, and he started hanging out there, and we just kind of got to know each other from there. And yeah, one of my favorite artists, and it's just such a treat to
That's really cool.
consider him a friend. I mean, yeah, it's like Jimmy Herring hanging out with Morse or something.
Yeah. I've learned it's funny. So we did the Prague Day thing, and
Yeah, I guess
another thing, huh?
you did some of Mike's music that day as well, right?
Yeah, it was mostly Mike's music. And I mean, his stuff is really hard to play. And when I listen to some of the bass lines that Brian does, Brian is another guy who he's so good at what he does. You don't even know what he's doing in
Right. He
some.
makes it look easy. Yeah.
Yeah. But I listened to these things and I was like, okay, I'm not going to play that because I can't play that, but I'll play something that's at least like that enough that it doesn't destroy the song. So I have a lot of respect for Brian. He's amazing.
Yeah, he is. Great guy. Excellent. Well, anything you want to share before we wrap it up here?
No, I just really feel fortunate, to have had the associations I've had and the experiences I've had. And, it seems like there's still a few things happening, which is great. I feel very lucky to be in a position where I'm not hustling,
Sure.
at this age.
Yeah.
I just turned 68. So I know I don't look a day over 66, but
56.
yeah, right. But it's an interesting point in life because you kind of disabuse yourself of any kind of extreme notions, of what you're going to do. At the same time, I feel very open to a lot of things, and there's a lot of stuff happening and just things coming in, and I don't know what's going to go on musically, but I'll keep doing it till I don't.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, cool. I was kind of curious if you had anything kind of on the front burner for 2021 musically, or.
Well, not really. Just when the inspiration strikes, I'll get drawn heavily into it. I've got a backlog, just like everybody does, who's kind of gets to this point of a million different ideas. I mean, I did an album, quote unquote, a solo album where Mike actually helped me a lot with that.
Is that Rama 1?
Yeah.
I love that record. Tell me a little more about how that came together.
Well, that was just a lot of songs that I had written, and I was kind of I was living in Chicago at the time, and I was really just had a blend of interesting influences. I really liked Ministry. So I was thinking, okay, I want to do something more heavy, but I also couldn't stop playing this weird eclectic stuff,
Right.
And
heavy, all right,
yeah. And I had met a guitar player named Toshi Iseda who, we became friends and had a band in Chicago. And he's kind of a shredder, but a really talented player. And, I'd written all these songs, and Toshi really kind of pushed me to do an album. And so I did. I got it together. He helped me get in touch with Jonathan Mover and Mike Portnoy, people I'd never met.
Quite the all-star cast in the drum chair there.
But I knew Mike, and I had kind of gotten the whole thing to a point where I was like, it's almost there, but I just can't quite finish it. And I called up Mike and said, can you just come to my house for like a week and see if we can put a nail in this thing? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so, of course, I sent him everything I had, and he didn't listen to anything. He just shows up at my house. and we start going through it. And I think it was about a week. And he basically, okay, we need a melody here. This is perfect. You don't need to do anything with this. Let's add a little keyboard here. I mean, he just basically took it to the finish line.
That's
And I'll
awesome.
never forget him for that. It was really great.
Oh.
So that's the kind of thing that can happen. I have a lot of snippets of things. If I actually get something into some kind of shape, maybe I'll call Mike up and say, hey, let's finish this, and he'll do it. Who knows?
Well, I think it's time for Rama 2. So,
Yeah,
fingers
exactly.
crossed. Do it.
All
Well,
right.
Andy, all the best to you, my friend. Come back anytime. Thoroughly enjoyed our chat. Love the music you've been involved with, and I'm excited to hear some more. So fingers
Well,
crossed.
thanks, Don, and I appreciate that you took the initiative to reach out to a lot of people that you appreciate as well, and just kind of show them
Oh,
some
absolutely. That's the thing about
attention.
this show is everybody that's on this show is somebody whose music has really touched my life in a positive way.
Yeah,
And I often get requests for people, interview my artist, and it's like, I can't yet. I don't know them. I got to know their music, and I got to love it on some level to feel informed enough to talk about it.
yeah,
Otherwise, I got to pass, and so it's not like some conveyor belt where, oh, come talk to me about your record. No,
yeah.
it's more like it. I got to know it. You got to be somewhere in my heart for me to do this. So,
Well, that's cool, man.
all right. Well, brother, take care and come back anytime.
All
And
right.
tomorrow afternoon, I'm doing a special Saturday afternoon show. We're chatting with David Sanctius.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you remember him, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So I'm totally stoked to get a chance to chat with him about Bruce Springsteen and Sting and Peter Gabriel and
Yeah, of course, I'm trying to remember where I first heard him. Was it with Jeff Beck, maybe?
possibly. I know he toured with John Anderson of Yes when he split from Yes around 1980.
I'm
Um,
thinking before then. I mean, I knew of
yeah,
him in
he
the
he
70s.
had his own group too, Tone, that did all
Yeah,
these Mahavishnu-esque kind of fusion albums.
that's right.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
That's when I remember him.
Yeah,
And then he became a professional.
right. Yeah, it's like this fusion guy's in Bruce Springsteen's band, and it's like
Yeah.
there's more to him than just that. And
No, it's really cool. It's
and
very cool.
what some
Well,
people might not know is E Street is the street that David Sanctius's mother lived on.
uh,
So the E Street Band, that's
oh
where
yeah.
it came from. So kooky. Anyhow, all right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Andy,
Okay,
take
good.
care. Stay strong and come back anytime.
Thanks a lot, Sean. See you.
My pleasure. Take care.